Hello and welcome to the Divine Renovation podcast, where we seek to inspire and equip you to bring your parish from maintenance to mission. My name's Dan O'Rourke, and I'm in studio today with just one other guy. I had my pick of the crop, and I decided to go with Father James Mallon. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well, Dan. Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, you've been away for a little while. You haven't been in studio a whole lot recently. You've had some travels, as you're apt to do with the ministry, and sometimes not even just for the ministry. Sometimes for personal reasons.
Yeah, I had some vacation time the last week or so I was away then, and so it's good to be back and getting ready to leave again, unfortunately. So it'll be a while before I'm back again.
Yeah, we've had a lot of busy stretch. I mean, the ministry gets so active, and because we're active in different parts of the world, I know it's, we've got sort of a rotating cast of characters sometimes, but I'm always excited when you get to be in studio and when we get to hang out. So
and it is summer, so we were a bit pared down, and Ron, who the viewers and the listeners are used to seeing here, he's actually in Australia right now. He's doing, I think, a 10-day
12 or 14,
something like that. Yeah, he's working hard. He's working hard. He did a talk at a major conference last night in Brisbane. It was very well received. And the next week or so, he's traveling to different cities, speaking to different groups, and meeting with some of our key people there who are parish leaders and such who are involved with Divine Renovation.
Yeah, I got a question for you because it is summertime. One of the things I've noticed is a lot of churches actually reduce their mass times. Now I know it's not summer for everybody in the world. I appreciate that, but here in North America it is summertime, and so some parishes actually reduce their mass times in the summer. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a good idea? A bad idea?
Well, it depends. Again, with anything with an idea, it depends on your context. You can't. It's good to be careful not to say this is a good or that this is bad. I think for some parishes it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Mm-hmm. The point is that summer is things are a bit slower, and we do need to have a cycle where we rest a bit more. A couple of weeks ago, myself and Rob McDowell, one of our coaches, we did a webinar on the whole question of the summer and the rhythm in a parish during the summer. I think as a matter of in most parishes, most parishes have more masses than they need, perhaps.
Yep.
So it is a sensitive thing because we've very much adopted a model of church where we offer services, mass times to people, and the primary value often is convenience. So we fell into the trap of multiple mass times, which maybe 20, 30 years ago was needed, but the problem is that we didn't remove any of the mass times, and so at least in my own diocese, we still have in most parishes way more masses than we need. And it's said that when a church is about 80% full in its capacity, that's a full church. That's a full church, and parishes really need to sit down and count the number of people and do the math and really ask the question: do we need this many masses? Not just in the summertime, but period. Yeah. Because if you get too many, then you're dispersing your energies. If you want to have a high quality weekend experience of Sunday Mass, and people may argue, well, the Mass is the Mass is the Mass. It doesn't matter the quality. That's a very human way of looking at the Mass. Mm-hmm. Objectively, yes, every single celebration of the Eucharist is objectively the once and for all self-offering of Jesus to the Father. It's the purest form of worship that we can have, and by itself it is objectively such.
Yep.
But the Church also teaches us about the fruitfulness of the sacraments are influenced by many other factors, and so things like good preaching, good hospitality, good music are very key to unlocking the fruitfulness of the sacraments. And if your energies are disseminated through a mass schedule that's not needed, then the quality of these things goes down. So I've seen parishes that have 7 weekend masses where they could get away with 3.
Yeah.
And imagine if you brought all those people, not just the people in ministry together, but even the people of the parish together. The Eucharist is about gathering people together, and often with our mass schedules we scatter people. So if you can address that in the summertime, that's a good thing. Here's a little trick: that once you have it in the summer, if you're in that kind of parish where you have an overpopulated mass schedule, maybe after a period of summer you might go to your parishioners and say, we've had this experience of reduced Mass time, and here's what we've experienced. It's been great to come together. We've been able to actually have the pastor preach all the Masses. You give all the good reasons and say, we're going to try a little experiment for the next couple of months, that as we return into a regular schedule, that we're actually going to keep the summer Mass schedule.
The summer Mass
that's
schedule.
Some parishes have found that that's a good way to address that problem and to ease into it.
And I think we've had a number of parishes actually apply to the coaching network, the Divine Renovation Network, in the last few weeks. And one of the cool things, right, and you get these emails too, right? They have to fill out this big form. And so we get a good sense of like how many people attend their parish and how many Masses they do. And we get all that information. And some of it's really fascinating because you can look at some of these papers and you go, ooh, they're doing a lot of Mass for a lot of people sometimes.
There's some churches that we've spoken to, they have like... Their churches are 20% filled on a Sunday Mass, 20% filled. I mean, they could cut their Masses down by 75% and not have anywhere near a full church. And you could triple the resources that you have to...
Why don't they do it?
Because people are afraid of... That's the most sacred thing for the average Catholic. I mean, you want to get pushback, change a Mass time. I mean, you almost get death threats. I mean, people go ballistic, because here's the thing: when you're not a missionary church, the primary driving model of church life is that of a consumer, and consumers want preferences, and so you don't touch my preferences. Here we have an unwritten agreement that you're here to provide these services for me. You give me a convenient Mass time, and don't mess with it. Don't mess with my favorite Mass time. And sadly, when our church and how and what we do and when we do it is primarily driven by people's preferences and not by a commitment to mission in terms of what's the most effective thing that will drive the mission forward, that's one of the things that contributes to the malaise and the ineffectiveness of what we do.
Wow, I feel like I should give you a loonie for fitting the word malaise into a podcast. It's a beautiful word, malaise.
One of the things too that for many parishes, like the priests that I speak to, they're often running from Mass to Mass to Mass and jumping into cars and going to different buildings, and in many ways it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, when one of the priests, no matter the particular giftedness of priests that I speak with, when you ask them what's most life-giving in your ministry, although guys have different types of gifts, almost every single priest says, a beautiful celebration of the Eucharist, like a Sunday Eucharist when you're gathering with the faithful and there's dynamic worship, there's singing, and that is just so life-giving. That is amazing. And yet, rather than doing that, we often disperse, and that's what's tragic. And the community doesn't get a sense of itself because you often have different worshiping communities within one parish, and 80% of the people that go to this Mass time never venture beyond it and have any encounter with people from other Mass times.
So it's funny to hear us talking about some of this stuff because I was rereading Rebuilt by Father Michael and Tom, and when you even just now, I haven't done my full reread of it, but if you go through the introduction, the first couple chapters, they talk about what they walked into, right?
Yeah.
And they talk about that consumer culture and how they were like, they walked into the sort of the preferences and everything, and it's so,
and the fact that they just imitated, they presumed a model of ministry that is built around meeting people's perceived needs.
Right, and perceived needs.
Needs.
And the demands that accompany those needs.
Yeah, and think of parenting. I mean, imagine as parents, if you model your strategy for how to be a parent was, let's respond to the perceived needs of our children. How would that work?
As a parent of 3, my kids would have nothing but chocolate in their diets.
Exactly. So
yeah, they perceive a need of nonstop chocolate, occasionally some ice cream.
And that's definitely one of the wonderful things I love about the book Rebuilt is the fact of how Father Mike and Tom really exposed that consumer dynamic that drives a lot of our churches. And oftentimes it's fear of conflict and pushback that will lead priests to hesitate changing it, tackling something like a Mass time, because you will lose people, especially if you're in a city and there's a nearby parish. Mm-hmm. I've experienced this time and time again, and every parish I've been in when I've dealt with the issue of changing Mass schedules, no matter how much people will talk about how loyal they are to the parish and that they've been in the parish for so many generations and such, that people will ultimately show that their primary loyalty is not to a parish or to a worshiping community or even a particular style of music in any particular mass. Their primary loyalty is to that mass time. So if you move the 9 o'clock mass, they will drive 10 minutes, 15 minutes across. They will find a 9 a.m. mass somewhere else in the city because that's their primary commitment. They will, if you change a music style in a Sunday morning mass, they will endure that style even though they hate it, because their primary commitment is to that particular mass time, because we're creatures of habit. Yeah. Creatures of habit.
So here's what I love about the summer months. It's not only is it a time to possibly look at your mass schedule and maybe make adjustments if you're in that kind of situation, but for me, it's a time for me to revisit books and to read new books. And one of the ones I'm reading now, of course, is Rebuilt. What about you? Do you read in the summer? What's your pattern look like?
I read in the summer. I enjoy. I've got a few novels on the go. I've also
like Stephen King or like Danielle Steele.
I like historical novels.
Oh, of course.
Well, I was on vacation. I was in Rome, and I was in Rome for a few days with a priest friend of mine, and we also went to Sicily. So I have there's an author who writes historical novels about ancient Rome and about centurions and Roman soldiers, and I like that stuff.
So I'm sure you're learning a lot from your Roman soldiers, and I suspect we could put
it is good. But I've also got some books on. In fact, I'm reading a book. Got it right here. It's called Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger, who is Presbyterian, from a Presbyterian background. He is associate pastor in the First Presbyterian Church of Hollywood, and he teaches at a seminary as well. And one of the coaches in our network gave me this book as a gift.
Oh, really?
Shout out to Kurt Clement. And if you think about the term canoeing the mountains, it's very, very strange. You don't take canoes on the mountains. But basically, it's subtitled Christian Leadership in Uncharted Territory. And he tells the story of Lewis and Clark, the great explorers who sought the Northeastern Passage. And so they got their canoes and they went to the head of the I think, oh my goodness, I think the Missouri River, perhaps I could get that wrong, but they took their canoes and then they portaged and they climbed the mountain, and they expected when they crested the mountain, they expected to see the river that would take them right to the Pacific. They expected to see ahead of them what they had known before. They made all kinds of presumptions. They just presumed it. They had their canoes, and of course, they got to the top of the mountain and they looked out, and all they saw was the Rocky Mountains, mountains and mountains and mountains. So they had to finally decide, are we going to try to canoe the mountains, or are we going to throw away our canoes and get horses? And it's about, the whole book is about the task of Christian leadership as we are now into a post-Christendom era. Christendom is gone, but yet we're still carrying our canoes. We're still holding on to models of leadership from what we've known. And we presume that as we climb the mountain and look ahead, we presume that what we're going to see ahead of us is what was behind us. Yeah. And it comes back to that great quote from Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium, chapter 27, about how he dreams of a missionary option capable of transforming everything, so that our ways of doing things, our methods can be changed. And that's the task that lies ahead of us, because the model of church life, of evangelization, of discipleship, and especially the model of leadership, the particular model of leadership that we've had in the church, it needs to change. Yeah. The leadership that we need going forward is not the leadership that we needed for a Christendom era church.
Right. And I find, I think in my experience, when you're in a leadership role, I think we need to constantly be feeding ourselves with new approaches and understandings. And I think, for me anyways, the summer months are one of those few times where we actually get to delve into exploring books and other materials that sort of feed us. Yeah. How do you go about finding stuff? I mean, that one was given to you by one of our coaches, Kurt Clement. How do you...
Yeah, I find if in conversation with other leaders, you usually just make these connections. That's how I've... other books that I've been reading recently, they're books that have been recommended by people who are familiar with what I'm passionate about. And for instance, I was on... just yesterday, I had a call with. I receive coaching on Strengths Finders. I've been working with a Strength Finder coach.
I think that's worth saying again, because I think a lot of people might find that surprising. Not only do you do coaching, But you receive coaching.
Yeah, because we're always can grow and learn, and there's so much for us to learn, and there's so much that I don't know, and then you find out there's so much that I didn't know that I didn't know, So that's the call to constantly learn. And I was sharing with my coach that next week I'm going to Manila. I'm going to the Philippines, and I'm going to be speaking at the Philippine Conference on New Evangelization, and I don't know much about it, but apparently it's a big deal. There's a lot of people, and I'm told there's going to be 5,000 priests and religious leaders and religious, and about 5,000 lay leaders as well.
Like around 10,000 people total.
That's what I'm told, about 10,000 people, and I've got to do 2 keynotes. And
I like how you say that's what I'm told. How I'm told. I want you to do a head count while you're there.
Right, everyone, sound off. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
because often people will say, "Oh, there's this many people," and you go, and it might not be exactly that. But that's my understanding, and I'm giving two keynotes at a plenary session, and then I'm doing a series of breakouts. And the topic they gave me was very intriguing because it's actually going to, I have to create a new talk because I've never quite given a talk on this topic, and I'm really excited about it. And it's on this very issue of we need to change our model of leadership. We need a different type of model of leadership. And even in the Philippines, which is probably one of the top Catholic countries in the world, they're feeling this culture shift. They're feeling the ground beneath them shake, and they're realizing that they can't rest on cultural Catholicism anymore. We've got to be in the business of making disciples, and that's going to require a change in the model of leadership, and that's what they want me to focus on. But in the title of the talk, they talked about servant leadership, and some of you watching, listening may have heard that phrase before, servant leadership, and been reflecting on it a lot. And anyway, I was sharing this with my coach, and he put me in touch. He said, "Have you ever heard of the writings of a writer called Dr. Karen Keller?" She is a clinical psychologist and has written a great deal on the subject of influence. Leadership is influence. And that's essentially, in the Divine Renovation ministry, we often talk about leadership as influence and how it differs from positional leadership, which was the traditional way, not just in the church, but in society as a whole. We gave respect to positional leadership, whether it was a doctor or a teacher or a politician or a priest, a bishop. It was like there was an immediate respect that was given. You got people's attention because of your position. Yep. It doesn't happen anymore. We live in a very, very, very different world. And so it's not just within the church. So people no longer respond necessarily to positional leadership. They respond to personal leadership, or the leadership that comes from who you are, comes from your character. And that's the question of influence versus a role. Because you can have the title, you can have the office, but if you don't have the influence, you're not going to lead anyone. You might intimidate or threaten people, but sometimes that's the kind of leadership that functions within organizations. So that's how it functions.
I don't want to get on a plane and travel 24 some odd hours to the Philippines. So why don't you give me a little more of a glimpse of what you'll share while you're there? Well,
I haven't. This is the first talk that I'm thinking about. I haven't produced it yet, but here are the thoughts. I guess a little preview. I've always been struck by what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 20. It's the only direct, as far as I can see in the Gospels, it's the only direct teaching he gave about leadership, the only direct teaching. There were many indirect things that he said, but it's the story when Jesus and the 12 are going towards Jerusalem, and of course, James and John approach him to say, will you allow us to sit at your right and your left when you come in your kingdom? And what's interesting is that at this point, they're still thinking of Jesus' kingdom in an earthly way, as earthly power, and to sit at the right and the left. That's to be your second in command and your third in command. Mm-hmm. That's positional leadership. That's a role of visible authority, and that's of course when they have that where Jesus kind of cons them. Can you drink the cup that my Father? Yes, we can drink it. Well, guess what? You're going to drink it and you ain't getting the seats. And they're like, go, darn. But then we hear that when the 10 heard it, this is in Matthew chapter 20, verse 24. When the 10 heard it, they were angry with the 2 brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. It will not be so among you. But whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant, and who wishes to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. This in a capsule is the essence of Christian leadership. In fact, I almost believe that within the church, when we talk about leadership, calling it servant leadership is redundant. Because if it's not servant leadership, what kind of leadership is it? It's not Christian.
Right.
This is the very model. Jesus says it is not to be so amongst you. The model of Christian leadership is to serve others. Now, it's still an exercise of leadership, but think about it. Jesus says, it's very explicit, it is not to be so among you. But think about the history of the church. We have embodied and embraced earthly models of leadership.
Structures, yeah.
In the Middle Ages, because the barbarian invasions and the Roman Empire, the court went to Constantinople, and the popes at the time were the only organizations left to kind of look after things, and very, very quickly the church leaders ended up becoming civic leaders. And by the Middle Ages, you've got bishops being called princes and taking on the trappings of nobility, coats of arms and titles like your eminence and your excellency and your whatever, you're this and you're that, and my lords. And we still say that today. In French, a bishop is called Monseigneur. And in English, we use the term Monsignor. Well, that means my lord. Well, that's what the nobility was called, my lord. And so we took on earthly models of leadership. And we still have that. We still have that kind of model of lording it over. And even today, sometimes bishops and others can maybe work as a kind of a CEO. Their model of leadership is almost like a CEO. They're from top down. You talk about how many people report to me. It's top down. It's a top down thing. Jesus said it is not to be so amongst you. So here's sorry, I'm on a bit of a
You're on a tear. Keep going.
Well, what I'm working out my talk right now as we talk. But what's curious is that in the past, where positional leadership sufficed in a Christendom model, when the church could function fairly well in a maintenance model within Christendom, today that style of leadership is, no one is going to follow a leader because he or she says this is what you have to do. Right. They might grudgingly do the minimal amount of work possible if getting paid is what they want at the end of a week. And so but then if that's the culture in your organization, then you've got to have timesheets, and you're going to have you've got to have bosses who basically spy on you to make sure you're not ripping them off, because it's the whole thing is based on threat, right? Yeah. So it's the difference between a boss model who basically threatens you with the consequences if you don't do what you're told.
Yeah.
Well, that's one way to do it. And then there's servant leadership, which is based on influence, which is about inspiring people and making people want to desire. I mean, they're not even going to, once you get to that place, they're not going to just do the bare minimum. They're going to go above and beyond because they love it. And it's not rooted in what we want from people, it's what we want for people, because this is life-giving in and of itself. And so that's influence. What's interesting is what I've discovered on the writings of this Dr. Karen Keller is that she's done some research into what influence is, and I've been reflecting a lot over the years and talking about influence. Influence comes from a Latin word influere, which means to flow into, and so when we flow into someone, that's influence. And what she's done, she's identified. Well, she points this out. She says, think about some of the most amazing leaders in the history of the world, even recently, like someone like Mother Teresa. Like who even knows what the Bishop of Calcutta's name was in the 80s? Like, no one knows. Like, the guy with positional authority, no one knows who he is. Yeah. But everyone knows who Mother Teresa was. She changed the world. She had no real strong positional leadership, yet she was a woman of incredible influence. You think of someone like Gandhi, people who had no kind of solid earthly role. Think of Jesus himself. He was from the north. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't a member of the Sadducees, or he wasn't a Pharisee. He wasn't a member of any of these religious orders. He wasn't a rabbi, even though he was called rabbi. He wasn't a formal rabbi. He had no formal role, no formal position, and yet he had authority because of who he was, and he had incredible influence because of who he was. This doctor has done some interesting research, and I just found out about this yesterday. But she talked about the chemicals in the brain. So if you think about a boss model of leadership, which is about, if you don't do what I tell you, you're going to have to pay the consequences. Either I will punish you, or I will withhold a reward. That's kind of it's about compelling people. It's often fear-based. It's based on threat. I mean, Here's the clear consequences. You do this, this is what will happen to you. It's based on threat. Now, what happens to us when we experience something that threatens us?
We retreat.
We might retreat.
What
We might also not retreat. It's fight or flight, right?
Yes.
You might flee, or you might attack.
Yep.
And what drives that response is when we experience the threat, we have cortisol gets released into our system, which clenches up our fists. It causes the blood to leave our brain and go down into our arms and our legs, so we can either fight or we can flight.
Yeah.
Be in flight, we can run. And so if you think about that traditional model of leadership that's based on threat and compelling people, it releases cortisol, fight or flight. On the other hand, when you talk about influence, and she talks about 7 traits of influence, but when you talk about servant leadership in terms of supporting in it being rooted in what we want for people, not from them, and it's rooted in loving and caring for people, what the studies have shown is that it releases oxytocin and dopamine. And these are chemicals related to the pleasure centers, a sense of well-being and pleasure within the human person. So there's a chemical pathway, in a sense, to or there's this chemical evidence of the effectiveness of this kind of model of
so you're seeing the
leadership.
chemical evidence of the two styles of leadership, whether it's the more traditional, I'm a boss, and here's what you got to do today, James. If you don't get it done, I'm going to wag my finger at you, versus the I'm here to help you do your job better. It's rooted relationally, and it's in the long term, it's much more effective and bears much more fruit. Can you speak at all about the 7? You said 7.
So I'm still discovering this because I just heard about this yesterday, and I've been online, and I tried to order her book. She has a book called Influence, the missing piece. But I think we have something a graphic to go on.
For those of us watching versus listening, yeah.
So she identifies 7 factors that contribute to influence. The first one, and I don't have time to really unpack these, but you can Google her, Dr. Karen Keller. The first one is confidence. That it's a characteristic of those who have influence, is a sense of confidence. Second one is commitment. Mm-hmm. The third is empowering, and that simply means that instead of me needing to do everything myself, I actually a person of influence is able to not just inspire others, but to actually empower them to allow them to take on responsibility. Courage, because if you're influential, you're going to possibly experience some kind of pushback, and you're going to need to be courageous. Passion is a key thing. You need to be passionate. Trustworthiness, that you actually earn respect. And that's one of the things that Todd Bolsinger talks about in Canoeing the Mountains, because he compares leadership on the map to leadership off the map. Because what happened when Lewis and Clark moved beyond the mountain range, there was no map.
Yeah.
And he said, no one's going to follow you off the map if you haven't if you haven't proven yourself trustworthy on the map in your leadership. So trustworthiness. And the next one is likability. And likability is not just about manipulating people. It's really about authentically caring for people. And so she takes these 7 traits and she breaks them out in greater detail. And to be honest, this is the first time I've ever seen influence broken up like this and analyzed a bit more closely. And she says it's these kinds of traits that actually will contribute to the release of these, the dopamine and the oxytocin that creates a sense of well-being and creates relationships and friendship, and is really most fruitful and much more fruitful than simply being compelled by threats.
So this is going to save a lot of people the duty of having to get on a plane and fly to the Philippines, because now that one of your talks, anyways, has got the Cole's notes, the brief notes.
This is unprocessed stuff. I've got to kind of lay it out. I've got to give this talk over the course of an hour and a half, so it needs to be a bit more content than that. But
I think it's fascinating. I think it's really, I think it's fascinating, and I think we've often at Divine Renovation, we often speak about the nature of leadership and how the nature of it is to be supportive of those who we work with. And so, when we're in leadership roles, we have to support those in ministry that are activating. And I know I've seen you draw the upside down.
I think this is so key for us, Dan, because like leadership is so key, and I continue to see this, that it stands or falls in leadership. Leaders, whether it's the parish priest, the pastor of a church, or a bishop, you can either be a bottleneck or a bottle opener. And the task of leadership is to unleash the other gifts. And yet bad leadership can shut everything down. It can kill what God wants to do. Yeah. And we still so often rely on the kind of boss model, the worldly model of leadership that Jesus said it is not to be so amongst you. And I see it time and time and time again, very kind of dysfunctional leadership models within the church that's simply based on, I'm ordering you to do this, and there'll be consequences otherwise. And even hear things in places saying, we're not here to be friends. Well, sorry, the research shows that some of the best things for team effectiveness and mission effectiveness can be the existence of friendships within teams, authentic friendships, deep friendships. Even, but Gallup recognized this in one of their questions in their Q12 and the ME25 around organizational health. Is the question says, I have a best friend in this organization. Mm-hmm. And over the years, people have said, well, can it just say a friend? Isn't that enough to say I have a friend? No, they're very intentional. When you can say I strongly agree with the statement, I have a best friend in this organization, that truly usually reflects a very healthy organization.
Remember when we were up on stage at DR18? It was our leadership team, the Divine Renovation leadership team, and I can't remember what the exact question was that we were asked from the audience, but it was it was a question about how do you build relationships in the team, something like that. And I can remember saying, and I know the room thought I was crazy, but I said, no, write this down. Breakfast. And I said, it's croissants, peanut butter, and eggs. And because I think it's something that our team does at Divine Renovation that I think actually is important to the fabric of what we are. In that every week our team comes together and we have breakfast together, and with a time of fellowship, and we take opportunities to invest in each other.
And let's be clear, like you said about upside down pyramid, and I think in a sense that's important. Like people say, oh, that's not really important. Like who cares? But when we draw an org chart that has the boss man or woman at the top and everyone underneath, it's top down. It's lording it over. Jesus says it's not to be so amongst you. And I think let's flip those org charts. Let's have the leader at the bottom supporting 4 people, and each of those 4 people supporting 4 other people, and everyone supporting. And Ron has been really strong about this. He's really caught us out when we talk about reports. I mean, I used to use that language. Oh, I've got so many direct reports. And he said, no, you've got direct supports. You don't have people reporting to you. You've got people for whom you are responsible to. Your responsibility is to support them. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't set goals, that there's no accountability. In a healthy organization, there has to be accountability. But if a team member is failing to meet goals, the starting presumption isn't that, okay, there's something wrong with you. The starting presumption is, okay, what have we not done? I mean, that's where you begin. Yeah. Because if there's a failure in an organization, it's first and foremost a failure in leadership. Because either you haven't set that person up for success, or you haven't addressed the failure, because most people don't just fail overnight. It's an ongoing thing that happens. And if your eyes are not open, if you're not recognizing it, then that's a problem of the leadership.
Yeah, we haven't equipped or given the right stage for a person to be successful.
That's
Absolutely.
Right. That's right. And some of the signs of an unhealthy organization is when employees are told basically you're doing a terrible job, and either you're fired or you've got a couple of months to turn this around. And it's like, well, how long have you been knowing I've been doing a terrible job? How come you're just telling me now?
Yeah.
There should be constant feedback. And so I think that's the starting presumption. Now you work with people, and eventually they might come to the conclusion where this isn't the right fit. Yep. Because when people are failing at their job, deep down they always know it. And it really affects their sense of integrity as well, and self-confidence. It can be a very costly thing to be in a job where your passions, your gifts are not well matched, or you're not a match for the culture of that particular parish or organization. Yeah. And so we do everyone a favor when we help people to move on. And you say, well, helping people to move on, that's just a nice fancy word for firing people. Okay, fair enough, it is. But I do think language is important. And firing is, you're fired. It's very much the language of utility. You no longer contribute to this organization. You're fired. It's punishment. Mm-hmm. Whereas helping people to move on, it's not just language. I think language is often reflective.
I think you fire someone who embezzles. You help someone move on if they're not performing as well as they ought.
Well, even if they embezzle, we can help them move on. Maybe to a prison cell. But I mean, I think that's a thing that even in the face of behavior that's unacceptable and immoral and not just inappropriate, that we still care for people. Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? And so I think language is important, and I would love to see more than a nod to this. I really think there's something significant to that, and I'd love to see in our church all of our org charts be upside down org charts. I'd actually love to see, can we get, maybe I get into trouble for saying this, why are we still clinging to medieval titles of respect to our church leaders? Why are we still calling them your eminence and your excellency and your lordship and blah, blah, blah? Like, what the heck? Like, read the gospel. Sorry, probably in trouble for saying that. But like, why? Like, who says we have, why are we stuck in that? People say, well, I don't want to be disrespectful. I think we can find other ways to show our respect for leadership without imitating the models of the world, a world of a bygone era.
So I'm gonna pivot you off of a danger territory here.
Yes, thank you.
And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to speak about something I know very little about. Are you open to me talking about stuff I don't know much about?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Vacation Bible School. So we're here, of course, in Canada. We're in the summertime, so we're hitting Vacation Bible School season. So I don't know if Vacation Bible School is something that happens everywhere in the world.
No.
But here in Canada, it's typically about 1 week long, and it's an opportunity for kids to come together. Now, my wife, Laura, she's the one who runs VBS, Vacation Bible School, here in at St. Benedict Parish. And I just wanted to share something that I really loved. And she sent a note around to the team at St. Benedict Parish. And she said, here's what I want you guys to think. And so she sent this to the team, the leads. And she said, I want you to think of Vacation Bible School as Kid Alpha. This is our opportunity to reach out to new kids.
That's right.
And this is a neat little shift that I think she's really brought into the mentality of VBS. Because I think our VBS has always been very full. But her goal is for it to create a culture of invitation among the kids. Yep. And VBS is sort of one of the key leverage points for that to happen. And I just think that's so, I think I get excited about it because, we want more kids at our parish. We've got lots. We want more. But this is a wonderful time for kids to be able to evangelize their friends by inviting them to something that is so...
I mean, I've always believed in that. It's my very first year as a pastor. For the first time, we had a program called Catholic Kids Net, and basically it was, VBS is a generic title, Vacation Bible School. It comes from a non-Catholic context, but fair enough. What is it? It's a fun time during the day for 5 days, and it's evangelistically focused, and it's invitational. You can have kids who don't normally come to church. You can reach families who don't normally come to church. You can reach families who are new in the neighborhood, and you also, your own kids have an amazing time, and it's a great way to build up leaders and have your teenagers be on team. So there are wins in many, many ways. And over the years as a pastor, in every single parish I've been in, we've always done this, and it's been very, very fruitful.
I think I love the fact that we've got that invitational sense, and that it's culturally appropriate no matter what age level. Right? It goes right back to our game plan in terms of what we're trying to achieve as a parish.
That's right.
So I love that. So a couple final thoughts, because we are in summer here,
Yes.
and so we're going to actually be reducing the number of podcasts that we release, because we've got a number of people that are both traveling for work-related conferences, and also we've got some people taking vacation, which I think our team much deserves. So I wanted to flag for people who are listening that you'll see sort of it might be a bit erratic, our schedule over the next month and a half or so, as we do these various times off, and people are in studio and not in studio. And so if you're used to our podcast coming out every week, get unused to it. It's not going to be quite that way. Anything else that you want to share?
I think if any of you are watching or listening from Manila, we're going to be it's going to be the Thrilla in Manila. Sorry, that's really bad.
That was bad.
I hope to maybe I'll see you there. And also I'm going to go to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia for a few days, and I'm doing an evening open session there. I think, I'm not entirely sure, but it's on our website. So maybe if you're there, you can come and say hello. And if you're listening from Australia, look out for Ron Huntley. He might be coming to a city near you.
And if you just happen to be listening from home, on our website and on our app, we have something we call Click to Commit, which is just committing yourself to being on mission, to recognizing that you want your parish to move from maintenance to mission. So if you haven't been to our website and clicked to commit yet, or if you haven't done it on the app, I urge you to do so. Part of our goal here is just to get a sense of the number of people around the world who are enthusiastically embracing mission. I think it's key to our identity as Christians, and I hope you're willing to take the step to actually join on the website. So thanks so much. God bless, and we'll see you again soon.